Well, hello, the internet. You're with Got That Funk, and this is a video response to my friend Laura Layla. And her video, Can Love Restrict and Still Be Considered Love? In a nutshell, I will say no to that with a caveat. Basically, no, love doesn't restrict, not if it's really love. Love wants someone, if you really love someone, you must, by definition, I would have thought, love them for who they are. If you don't love them for who they are, but you love them for some potential that you perceive them to have, I suggest that you need therapy. I don't mean you personally, hon. I know you don't think like that, but I would say that to anybody. I don't understand this impulse to want to change someone from the very outset of a relationship. It makes a little more sense as these things come up sometimes as relationships progress, because people basically want to make their own life as easy as possible, and sometimes, without even realizing it, sometimes people will be saying little comments or doing little actions which may or may not be deliberate, but their goal is to modify the behavior of people around them. We do it every day in every relationship that we have. And the thing is, when you're in a romantic relationship, you are more attuned to these types of things than you might be in your other relationships. A lot of people will let their friends say things to them that they would never let their partner say to them, for example. So, yeah. Insecurity, in my opinion, is where this urge to restrict comes from. And, I think if you can recognize that everyone has these insecurities, by communicating about your own insecurities, where your red lines are in the relationship, what's going to set you off, what your triggers are, then your partner doesn't necessarily have to stop being who they are. They just have to be considerate of your triggers. And sometimes, not everything is in other people's control. Sometimes third parties will cross a line which makes someone in the relationship feel uncomfortable, and you need to realize that you don't have to blame people for everything and blah 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 blah. You're out there in the world, real things happen, okay? But this is my point exactly. Part of real life is people are insecure. People have their own personal insecurities. Am I too fat? Am I too thin? Am I not smart enough? Am I not well dressed enough? Do I not make enough money? What about my image? Blah blah blah. Different things that people feel about themselves, and sometimes these insecurities can get projected onto the relationship because people are very good at avoiding looking at their own insecurity and owning it. You know, um, Whereas if the opposite is true, if you can look at yourself and say, okay, here's where my red lines are, and then tell your partner about these things way early on in the relationship. In fact, I would go about telling my partner these things before we were actually in the committed part of our relationship. People need to know what they're getting into. And I'm really big on communication. I think it's the most important aspect of a relationship. A lot of insecurities in the relationship, though, aren't just the ones that people bring from their own personal insecurities. A lot of them are insecurities about the relationship itself, and the deeper love is, the harder it is to imagine yourself or your life without your partner. And that necessarily brings a whole set of vulnerable emotions closer to the surface than would otherwise be. I mean, anybody can be very strong and independent in real life most of the time when they're on their own. But insecurity can make a child out of anybody. I don't care how smart you are or how emotionally strong you normally are. If something pushes your triggers, um, you can be a completely different version of yourself in a single conversation. And it can happen to anybody. I think because it can happen to anybody, it's important not to put too much blame on anybody when it happens. On the other hand, some people are have so many triggers that you can't deal with them. I personally can't be in a relationship with someone who has too many triggers, but at the same time, I do accept that everyone has triggers, and if I want mine respected, then I want to be able to offer that to someone else as well, to the best of my ability. Um, and an awful lot of relationship insecurities can come from previous relationship failures, which then get projected onto the new relationship as a matter of habit rather than a matter of experience. If you've been cheated on once or twice, you know that it can be really hard to trust for a while after that. And that's not the person that you're with. That's not their fault at all. And it's very easy sometimes to project that onto them because you were so badly hurt before that you're just trying to protect yourself. And trying to protect yourself is natural and normal. And we shouldn't be blaming other people for trying to protect themselves. We just need to be able to pick the right moment and point out where this is coming from, and not do it in a sort of I'm blaming you for this way, but in a sort of look, I don't want this to adversely affect our relationship, and I wonder if you've considered blah 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 blah, which can sometimes come across as pretty patronizing, but at the same time, I just think asking someone to own their emotions is a good thing, because everyone wins if you can talk about these things without a sense of blame, but with a sense of responsibility and respect. Open communication comes with a pretty heavy price, because maybe people know a little bit more than they might otherwise ask for. But in my opinion, a healthy relationship revolves around good communication, and communication, I think, can solve most of these problems which otherwise would lead to these restrictive behaviors that often lovers can get into. I also think the tendency to try to change other people can just be lazy thinking sometimes, because everyone wants their own life to be as easy on themselves as possible, and sometimes, whether or not we mean to, you can say things or do things, which, whether or not they're deliberately your goal, have the effect of altering other people's behavior. And that's not always a good thing. In fact, it's often a bad thing. But sometimes it's not really deliberate. It's not premeditated anyway. But some people do roll that way, and that's a really hard one to communicate, because if people don't realize they're doing that type of thing, it can be really, really difficult to show it to them. Anyway, thank you for your interesting video. I always love our conversations. So until next time, thanks for listening, and may all your ups and downs be ups.